Hey everyone, and welcome to the webinar. What are we talking about today? We are talking about navigating the AI search shift and our state of AEO and GEO in 2026 report. But before we get into that, let's talk about who we are and who's the speaker today. Hey everyone, my name is Pat Reinhart. I lead professional services and thought leadership at Conductor, and I am joined here with my awesome colleague Lindsay.
Hey everyone, welcome. Lindsay Hagan here, head of marketing at Conductor, and really excited to take you through the research that we did and what the implications are for marketing teams and digital leaders.
All right, great. And I think the best place to start is, what was the methodology of this survey? And, kind of break it all down. Lindsay, I think I'll kick that over to you since your team did this amazing research.
Awesome. Yeah, so to learn, we really wanted to dig in at the start of this year and learn more about the evolving AI search landscape and really like the strategies, the priorities, and the investment plans of today's top digital executives. So we went out and we surveyed 250 executives and digital leaders on AEO, GEO, SEO, and what they're doing. And this report today, we're going to break down the findings. The respondents were sourced from enterprise level organizations. So those are folks with 500 plus employees across 12 different industries. It's all US based respondents. So just something to keep in mind as we go through the data today.
All right, good stuff. And why everybody is here. So let's start and get into it. So what were the types of questions that we asked folks, right? So let's start with this one. Like, how did AEO GEO impact marketing in 2025? And what were the top challenges and strategies? And this one I felt was really, kind of really interesting because 97% of respondents reported that AEO had a positive impact on the overall marketing funnel last year. To me, this is somewhat surprising, because number one, we're still in very early days. There's not a ton of data coming from LLMs like directly yet, which is where a lot of people are skeptical. But the cool thing is that people are recognizing that this is important, but also that there are technologies out there that actually give them the confidence that this is true, right? And I think it really is interesting to see that 2% said no impact, 1% said slight negative impact, and that the vast majority think that this is a good thing, which I agree with, by the way. I think the whole dawn of AI, this new kind of era in search is exciting for me. I've been in search for over 20 years, and I feel like I'm learning all over again. I'm a nerd. I love learning about this stuff. So I think it's a positive thing, and I'm happy to see that the market is responding the same way. Lindsay, what do you think?
Yeah, I was actually surprised by this. I mean, pleasantly surprised, but I think what we saw mid last year is folks were really worried about the drops in traffic. Across industry, we were seeing folks see 10, 15, 20, 30% drops in traffic. And that's really scary as a marketer because that's sort of the top of your funnel. And if that starts shrinking, the rest of your funnel kind of shrinks down with it. So I thought folks were going to be a little bit more nervous, not as positive about it. But I thought this was great to see that folks are able to see the advantages of AEO, GEO, and despite traffic shifts, they're realizing that, hey, there is this huge opportunity sitting in front of us in AI search.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting. And again, like the changing landscape, even though a lot of people are freaked out about it, there is opportunity in chaos, everybody. And again, like what this also tells me is that this is why I've been speaking to so many C-level executives this year. Like, I think I've spoken to more C-level executives in the last 12 months than I have in the last 6 years, about search. It is top of mind. People are talking about it. They're writing about it in publications like the Wall Street Journal. That's when that's when you've made it, and that you're really at the top there of people's minds, which is really exciting. And with that comes challenges, right? So the top AI visibility challenges that people reported were creating AI search optimized content at scale. That makes sense. Difficulty measuring impact and ROI. That has always been true of this channel, but even more so now that even though there are technologies out there, they're still advancing. And the next one is unable to monitor if content is being crawled by LLMs and AI bots, which is interesting because you can do that. But my take on this is, creating AI search, optimized content at scale. I think this is kind of the age-old SEO problem too, which is how do you create good content at scale without it being just slop, which is what is like flooding the the internet right now. Is just people going to ChatGPT, typing in a one-line prompt and putting articles onto their site. We're seeing it happen in every single vertical. We're seeing it happen at a lot of different companies that are trying things out. And there's always, you got to remember now that we've kind of like, we're back in the Wild West here, right? Even though we never really left, but we're in like really the Wild West, like back in 2003 for me, where a lot of stuff worked. You're seeing spammers, start to work this and make quick money, and that's going to be a thing. It'll probably won't last as long. But the next thing, which has always been a challenge for this channel, is measuring impact and ROI. This will come along. We are still in the infancy here. So what are people measuring now? They're measuring, they're measuring mentions and citations. And AI bot crawler activity, which is interesting that this one came back. That just means that there's a lack of education in the market right now, which is, which again is an opportunity because Conductor website monitoring does this, right? You can actually monitor your server log files and see when bots are coming and where they're going to your site. So I think that that's just a little bit of education that needs to happen in the market. But Lindsay, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I guess, Pat, on the third one, what, for folks that may not be as familiar with kind of LLMs and AI bots, like why is that important to be able to measure?
Yeah, so this is kind of like a new old thing. So basically what we're talking about here is server log file analysis, right? So for anyone who doesn't know, you can go into your server and you can see logs of when bots hit your site and what pages they hit. So you can understand like, hey, is Google, like how we've used it in the past, or really, how we've used it historically is a better word, is that you're looking for how Google is crawling your site to make sure that they're going to the right pages, et cetera, right? With AI bots, you want them constantly pinging your site. So why would you want to measure this? Because you want to make sure that that LLM bots are going to your site and retrieving the data, because that means they are chunking them out and putting them back to the users in their responses. And the other way that you can use this is you can understand where like dead zones are on your site. Like, hey, like there's this area of my site that I want to be crawled or pinged and it's not. And that is an optimization opportunity. So log file analysis, typically for technical SEOs back, in the past, this is something where, technologies are doing this and making this a lot easier for people, where you can take very quick action on it.
Yeah, that's super helpful context, Pat. And I know, like for myself, maybe in the past, I wasn't as like a head of marketing going in and looking at our log files and checking how the site was being crawled. But now with Conductor web monitoring, I'm certainly going in and looking at high priority pages and seeing, are the AI bots getting to those pages? How quickly are they getting to them? Are they crawling them? Because it's, I think, unlike Google of the past, where you would publish a piece of content, it would take a while to get some momentum. I mean, you can publish something and it gets crawled almost immediately. So it's crazy to see how fast some of this is happening, and you can really see that in the bot traffic.
Yeah, and like I said, I think it's exciting that people are going to be forced to learn new skills here, or learn about things that they knew about, but they maybe just felt that they were not technical enough to like get it. You know what I mean? Which I think is an opportunity for people to upskill.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so that's that. Next one, the top. So let's talk about the reported top AEO GEO content strategies. Right, number one was AI content generation at scale to increase topical authority. We'll talk about that in a second. Number two, structured data and schema markup. Not surprised to see this, talk of the town. Everybody's talking about how important schema markup is. And then number three is authoritative long form guides. Now, taking these kind of one by one, AI content generation at scale, again, if you do it right? Asterisk here, if you do it right, garbage in, garbage out. And you can see with the last update that Google just had, a massive update in December, that a lot of companies that are just putting content onto their sites, just like from a volume standpoint, they are seeing diminishing returns, and they're actually starting to see things turn negative. The sites that are doing well are ones that have a plan, right? They're not just writing for the sake of writing. They have set up authorship. They have experts on their teams that understand, that they can put out into the world, because authorship is so important. But ultimately, to me, this one is really about doing it right, not just doing it. Lindsay, thoughts on that for someone who creates a ton of content every year for Conductor?
Yeah, I think 1 and 3 are really related, because what we've found at Conductor, exactly what you said, Pat, it's not about just creating kind of AI slop or like shallow articles or things that aren't don't have a lot of depth. What we found is that even if you want to put out more content, the content really does have to have depth and authority to it. And so for us, even if we're putting out more research than ever, more insights than ever, hence this report that we put out. But even more of the foundational glossary style content that we like to publish to help with different topical authority, those are now longer, they're more in depth. We're tapping experts like you, Pat, to like provide quotes, and we're definitely like the SMEs internally, the subject matter experts internally, we're pulling more into the content process more consistently to have that unique POV, rather than just kind of, because you need something now that differentiates you from AI slop, and that's authority, that's wisdom, and that's what we're doing a lot more of, and we're finding that really successful.
Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to, everyone. Someone here just like asked a really good question, like ideally, like what metric should one measure, right? To say like, is all of these things that we're doing working? And again, there's hard metrics like mentions, citations, AI bot crawler activity, and sentiment, that you can start out with. But we also have to recognize that the content that you're creating, like understand that this is not a keyword play, right? This is not a traffic play. AI is a visibility play and an authority play. And I mean brand authority, not link authority, right? SEO and AI search are two different channels, right? Like, yes, they converge and they are very, very similar to one another, but the way to measure and the behavior is different. So whereas traditional search, you'd be optimizing to a keyword, et cetera, et cetera. In AI search, you really have to understand your personas and the intent stages of each of those personas and where they intersect. That's how you can really understand where to create content at scale, what your schema strategy should be, and ultimately, if you're creating long form guides, what convergence of persona and intent are you not hitting on? That is how you'll have a really killer strategy. And again, like the Conductor team has done such a good job on that, not to toot our own horn, but we believe this so much that we're actually building that into our product. We're actually building a grid that allows you to see that to our product, which is releasing very soon, which I'm very excited about. But from there, that is the first set of questions that we had. And Lindsay, I know you're going to take this section.
Yeah, so then next in the report, we asked all about investment and resourcing in AEO GEO. And this one I was very curious about. For any marketing leader out there, you always get questions around like, what's the benchmark? Like, how much should we be investing in this? Should we be doing this in-house? How many folks do we need? So this series of questions was really interesting to me. So first off, we talked about annual budget allocated to AEO GEO. And so what you can see here is 12% was sort of the benchmark of overall marketing spend that was dedicated to AEO GEO. And it varied a bit by marketing budget. So obviously folks with smaller budgets were spending a smaller percentage, but all the way up to like 15% of budgets were going to AEO GEO, which I thought was really encouraging. I think traditionally SEO has been seen as this thing that was almost free. Oh, like it's just going to come, we're going to get organic traffic, we don't really need to invest. And we saw that all the time with customers thinking that it could just come for free. And to see that folks are really focused on this, they're putting dollars to it. I mean, this was just, I thought, a really good and encouraging stat for the industry. I mean, Pat, what did you make of this?
Everyone, this is wild. This is wild. I've been in SEO for a million years, and seeing that this percentage of budget is being like allocated to this should make everybody in this in this industry excited. Because how long have we been going into boardrooms and into meeting rooms and asking for budget and really having a hard time justifying that? Because hey, like when am I going to see results? Yeah, we have to work on that. You have to talk about the long play, because it's like 401k versus day trading, which is something I've always used. But ultimately, this makes me excited, and this should make everyone excited, because this is more money into teams like ours and more money that brands are investing into this space, which only means good things, right? That means that our, folks that are in these positions, your job just got way more important and got way more spotlight, which is really good. Even though some people might say, "Oh, I don't know about that," but like that, this is a good thing, because it's something that we've kind of been waiting and fighting for many, many years.
Yeah, and Pat, the interesting thing too is, I think you spoke to this earlier, you've been getting more requests for meetings with C-suite than ever before. C-level, CMOs, CEOs of like some of the biggest companies in the world. And I think it's showing up in the budgets. Like this is now a C-level priority, AEO GEO, which SEO always sort of struggled to get that seat at the table. And so now we're seeing it come in the budgets, which to your point, or Pat, is like really, really exciting in terms of like where we are as a priority. And we'll talk about priorities in a minute. But I thought this was really encouraging.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, like I am flying to Toronto in March to sit on a panel for AEO with all financial services leaders, like people with way more letters in their titles than mine. And it's really exciting to have a seat at the table and have them care about me. Like I was on a call with the CMO of one of the largest payment processing companies in the world. And he looked at me and said, talk to me like I'm a 6-year-old. And we had like a lovely conversation for over an hour. And this is the type of doors that are being opened by this right now, which again is extremely exciting for this industry.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at the chat here, and I see Christy. Hey, Christy, put a note in that this is the first time ever in her company that folks are investing in AI search at the group level. So it's happening across the board, and I think this data just solidifies what we're all kind of feeling, and why I really loved this report.
Yep.
So the next one, I think, not surprising, but also, again, a good validation of what we're all feeling and hearing and seeing is how our AEO GEO investments are changing in 2026. And 94% of folks said they are seeing an increase in investment. Makes a ton of sense. The folks that started investing last year are already seeing results. They're going to continue to increase or at least maintain that investment. And then I think interestingly enough, folks that maybe were a little slow to get started with AEO, GEO, or SEO as a whole are now saying, okay, we have to put some money into this channel. It's becoming a non-negotiable. This is where customers are spending their time, and we as a brand need to be there. Pat, what do you think on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of a gold rush right now, right? Like people like first movers, they're seeing the ROI, and people who are, taking the wait and see approach are now starting to ramp up. They're seeing, they're talking to their friends and their colleagues in other industries, and, they're going to conferences and they're speaking, they're hearing speakers about this and the results that they have gotten and the positive impact that it's had on their business. And now they're ready to move. So you're seeing this kind of cascading, momentum building across these, and these are large companies, by the way. These are huge enterprise companies that are moving, and I can tell you even SMBs, are moving quick on this. But seeing these large enterprise, companies invest in this and talking about increasing their investment, that just shows you how important this is to everybody, and also how important it is to kind of like the future of visibility, right? Because AI, in the next 18 months, probably 90+% of all searches will be on an AI surface, or at least influenced by an AI search. That might even be happening now. But at the end of the day, we have to recognize that this is something that companies are going to continue to invest in. And if you are in this field, look at this as one of the greatest opportunities in your career. Yes, it's a little chaotic right now, but again, there's opportunity in chaos.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think there's so much chat and so many questions going on. We won't get to all of them, but just sort of scanning a few of them. I think when we think about resourcing, one of the questions was, where are these budgets going? I think the two big places that they're going, and Pat would love your take on this, is we're seeing is technology. So can you measure this? Can you create good content at scale? So technologies like Conductor, and then also in-house resourcing. So that's what this slide gets at, is how are we resourcing for this? And it's folks are not only upskilling their teams, which you can see 64% of respondents said they're doing, but 29% of folks, almost a third of companies, are saying, hey, we're actually going to bring in some new folks to help resource our AEO teams, because they realize how important it is to not only have technology, but you also need folks behind the keyboards managing these programs.
And I'm telling you what's happening here, everybody, is what happened last year is that the first movers bought technologies and to understand how how it all operates and what it looks like. And then they started to upskill their internal teams, right? And now what you have is you have a lot of teams that know what they're doing. There's still a long way to go. Don't get me wrong. We're all learning. No one is an expert in this yet. We're all learning. But a lot of what my services team is doing is helping internal teams upskill and to build processes around this, right? And that's why you see 64% starting there. And then what's happening is you're going to probably see that 64% shrink and that 29% hiring new AEO specific roles increase next year, because a lot of companies will recognize that, hey, while we have all these people doing this, we need someone to run this, or we need a central team to actually run this across our huge organization. And you're going to start to see AEO hires specifically start to pop up. You already see them, you already see it, but that's really what, in my opinion, what's happening here. And again, there'll be others that will leverage consultants, outsource to an agency. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. But the trend is in-housing. And I can tell you from all the companies I've talked to, and I'm blessed to talk to hundreds of amazing companies every single year. It's one of the best parts about my job. And I can tell you most large organizations, even medium-sized organizations, are really focused on in-housing right now. And then when they get the in-housing to a point where they feel like, there's the return isn't going to be there, or they need someone to kick it up a notch, that's when they're going out and they're hiring people. Big opportunity.
Absolutely. So let's shift gears a little bit, Pat. What are the features and pain points of AEO GEO technologies that our folks are looking for? Let's dive into these questions.
Yeah, and this one makes sense, and again, like, technologies are evolving. Like, we rebuilt our entire infrastructure and product, like, over the last couple of years, and we just launched it last year. Conductor is only going to get better, and all these technologies will only get better, right? Like, this is not a plea for Conductor. This is a plea for technology. But number one is AI search, visibility, brand mentions, domain citation tracking, et cetera, et cetera. Answer engine coverage. Like, we want to look across multiple engines. I have a thought on that. Number three, intelligent content optimization recommendations. People want to know what to do. They don't just want the visibility. They want a technology to say, hey, where's the gap, and here's what you should do. Competitor benchmarking, which makes total sense, and and referral traffic. Like, how much traffic are we actually getting from these engines? Which, from our other AEO GEO report, on average, LLMs send about 1% of traffic, because again, LLMs, referral traffic, not really a traffic play. It's a visibility and brand authority play. But one thing, let's talk about, a couple of these quickly. Number one, this is going to evolve, as technologies evolve, like how visibility will be looked at. Right now, everyone's looking at mentions and citations. What they should be looking at is also sentiment, right? Is really understanding sentiment in LLMs. Very, very powerful, optimization opportunities there. The one that I go back and forth on is number two, right? Comprehensive answer engine coverage. To me, you should track, because again, tracking AI correctly is not cheap. It's just not cheap. It's, it will get cheaper over time, as compute costs go down. But right now, it costs a little bit of coin to get, to go across all these. And you really don't need to look across every single LLM, right? You should do it by market share. Right now, ChatGPT has about 65% of market share. Gemini has about 25%. And then I would probably track, AI mode, or I would track like Perplexity, because Perplexity is the only LLM that was actually built as a search engine. You have to remember, ChatGPT is not a search engine. It's anyway, we won't get into that. We don't have time. But ultimately, but thinking about that, I do it by market share. But a lot of people want to look, well, I want to see every single LM. That's totally fine, by the way. If you want to do that, it's just going to cost money. But ultimately, remember that you don't have an optimization strategy for Google, Bing, and DuckDuckGo. You have an optimization strategy for Google, and it typically works fine across those other search engines. That's kind of what we're looking at here. You really need to understand what's happening in Gemini and ChatGPT, because that's where everyone is. ChatGPT's market share is dwindling, over time, and Gemini will eventually take over, in my opinion. But ultimately, that one, I think that will shake out over time. Like, what's the right things to track based on your business, right? And I get the recommendations one, right? I think people want to spend money on these technologies, but they don't just want the visibility. They want to be like, okay, so what's the so what, right? So what do I do? Lindsay, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I'm happy you touched down on what engines to track, what content to create, and how you should think about your strategy. Because we get questions all the time of like, okay, so I need like 10 different content strategies, one for each engine. And that really gets folks, I think, confused and sends them down the right path. It's really, again, I think it comes back to having a really good content strategy around creating high value, authoritative content with a lot of depth, authorship, all the things that we talked about earlier, and that will work across engines. So I'm really glad you mentioned that for folks, because we definitely feel that question a lot.
Yeah, and there's one really important question that was asked in the chat right here, which is, how do we know what metrics and recommendations from AEO GEO tools are accurate? Everybody, the most important thing, if you take anything away from this webinar today, is that when you are vetting technologies, make sure you understand where their data comes from. There are a lot of vibe coded competitors out there right now that are scraping data off of ChatGPT and other LLMs. Sometimes that's the only way to get a response, like Google. There's no search API that you can plugged into. But if you're looking at someone, a technology, make sure that if they are showing ChatGPT, which I would imagine they would be, make sure that they are actually connected to their API and getting that data across all of the different agents that are using OpenAI's API, not just ChatGPT, right? Because that data is super low fidelity. You also have a lot of companies that are buying panel data, which is super sketchy, and that is completely inaccurate. And collecting prompts that way. So again, like that, if you want the most accurate, get a technology that collects it in the most high fidelity way.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm looking at the chat here, and I know we won't get to all questions or almost that time, but like a lot of questions on LLM.txt. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, so LLMs.txt, for anyone who doesn't know, it's basically like your robots.txt file, which shows directives on your site, right? LLMs.txt largely is the same thing. It basically lays out for LLMs what part of your site is important and what are they about. And you can put a lot of information in there, and it just helps LLMs get more raw data quicker about your site, which in theory would increase your visibility, in LLMs. But they are not an adopted protocol yet, so they don't do anything at the moment. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with creating one. They're easy to create. There's generators out there that you can use. There's plugins in many of the major CMSs. But again, not an adopted protocol. That will probably happen this year. But right now, the only benefit to them, we believe, is for internal agent use, but nothing external yet.
Awesome. Thanks, Pat.
Yep.
Okay, let's keep cruising here. We have a few more interesting data points to share out.
All right, cool. So next one, top technology pain points. Data quality, trustworthiness. So we answered that one, so I won't go down that rabbit hole again. Siloed capabilities, need for many tools. People want an all-in-one solution. You can see this is something that, there's been a ton of consolidation over the years in technologies. People want everything in one place. They don't want to bounce around between 3 or 4 tools. Limited ROI clarity or performance measurement. Totally understand that, depending. And again, it depends which technology you use. Some are better than that. Some are great at it. Some are not so great at it. And then limited coverage or depth of monitoring. Again, can't get across the entire site, or doesn't really collect enough, or lack of customization, brand voice alignment with generated content, meaning you can hit a button, but you can't actually put anything in to customize it. So all of these pain points exist across many different platforms. Again, for us, number 1, number 2, number 4, number 5 are not issues for Conductor. I know that they can be challenging for others, but limited ROI clarity. That one is the one where we're working. This is something that we're actually actively working on right now. It's like, how can we prove, hey, we did something and it did this for the brand. So I don't know, any thoughts on that, Lindsay?
Yeah, I mean, these all make a ton of sense to me. I don't think anything super surprising stood out. But let's keep going. I think there's definitely some more data we want to share with folks. And this one I love, because this section we get into like priorities, goals, and metrics. And I've seen a lot of chatter in the chat around what metrics folks should be looking at. So this was awesome to see. So we asked folks to rank, what are your top marketing strategies, priorities for this year? And 32% of CMOs listed AEO GEO as number 1. So I think that's really huge. And that, I think, ties back into our early conversation around budget and C-suite priority. Folks are really trying to understand this year and make an impact here. It is taking up so much more of the customer journey over time. It's eating up more and more. Folks are spending less time on your website and more time in these LLMs doing research and understanding your brand and your products. So it makes sense that AEO GEO is number 1, and folks are really trying to make this a big priority for this year.
Yeah. And again, like, just echoing what you're saying, it's really cool to see this at the top, right? Like, it's really cool that, like 32% of CMOs, listed this as their top priority. Again, I've said it a million times this webinar, very exciting for the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think top AEO GEO goals for the year. This makes sense to me too. I mean, folks really want to start winning AI search visibility. And they really want to make sure that they're increasing their brand visibility, both at mentions and citations. And that sort of gets us to this last side, which I think is what, again, I've been seeing in the chat, a lot of conversation around what metrics to prioritize. So what are folks looking at? Well, one, they're looking at conversions and leads from AEO, GEO. They're looking at AEO search market share. So how are you doing for the prompts you care about and the topics that you care about? How are you doing compared to your competitors? Referral traffic, ton of sense. As Pat mentioned, it's small, but definitely growing. And then AI referral traffic, at least what we're seeing, certainly has a higher conversion rate than your more traditional traffic. And then brand sentiment and brand mention. So this is sort of a really good view of like the top a metrics pack that you can walk into the board with to show how you're doing across the several different vectors in AI search. What did you think of this, Pat?
Yeah, I mean, this makes sense, right? Like people want to know, like, what am I getting out of this? They want to understand their visibility, how much traffic they're getting. I think sentiment is going to become even more important as time goes on because like sentiment has not been easy to measure unless you buy obviously like a listening tool, which a lot of people don't have access to. But and then like some hard metrics like how again you can see a lot of it is related to brand, right? And like AI has a lot to do with brand authority. People want to know, hey, when someone types in a bunch of stuff into ChatGPT, what does my brand look like? Like, what is the sentiment? What are people saying? And there's a lot of optimization opportunity to understand that data, and there's years of work like that is created by that, which is a good thing in my opinion. But this this makes sense. All of this makes sense.
Yeah, and I think for us as marketers, there's a lot of education we have to do. Our boards and our C-suite are used to seeing things like organic traffic and impressions, and not that those things aren't important, especially those of us that are have a lot of traffic that are still coming from SEO and traditional organic listings and rankings. That's not going away, but we certainly need this new metric pack. Like I know for me in my board decks, I'm now putting workspaces right from Conductor of mentions, citations, market share right in a board meeting, which is not something we would have done a year ago because AI search just wasn't there. So it's super important.
Yeah, no. And I think with that, I think that's a good place to end. I know we're a couple minutes over. Everybody, thank you so much for spending 30 minutes or 32 minutes of your valuable time with Lindsay and I. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, please reach out. We're happy if you want to take a free trial of Conductor. If you want to, just have any questions answered, always happy to jump on the phone with anyone or answer an email. But again, on behalf of Lindsay and myself, thank you all so much for spending 30 minutes of your valuable time with me. And Lindsay, any last words?
No, all this data is all available on our website. The link should be in the chat, so you can all go download it if you want the slides. It's all there and available. It's in a PowerPoint, so you can pull it right into your own decks when you're trying to get more budget, get more team members, resourcing, all that good stuff. So thanks, everyone, and we'll see you all next time.
Take care, y'all.